The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
As Jimmy Butler is heading to the Bay Area.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Golden State Warriors get Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, the two-way player, is heading to Golden State. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins. They get P.J. Tucker and a protected first. The Detroit Pistons get Lindy Waters and Josh Richardson. The Utah Jazz get Dennis Schroeder, and the Raptors get Kyle Anderson. So Anderson, Schroeder, Wiggins, Lindy Waters, and a protected first are what's shipped out of the Bay Area, and that is what Miami gets. And the Warriors get a standalone talent in Jimmy Butler, someone who has been suspended, someone who is excellent when the lights shine brightest. And we're talking a catalyst to a player that's taken his team to the NBA Finals. And now he plays next to Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, and the big one that you lose is Andrew Wiggins. The big question, Kolsky, did the Golden State Warriors just get better today? And I guess the bigger question is the extension. 3 days ago from Windhorst, we heard he had no plans of signing an extension in the Bay Area. Is this some sort of a crazy salary dump? What is to make of this to start?
Oh, man. So much to say. Dennis Schroeder, we hardly knew you. I think, okay, so a couple things. Let's start with who they sent out. Anderson, Schroeder, Wiggins, Waters. You know, I guess people like Lindy Waters. I like Lindy Waters well enough, but none of those pieces are a significant part of the future, right? None of those pieces really matter to your future. Schroeder's expiring. Anderson had a couple years on his deal, but like he's in his that's not an important.
But Wiggins matters. He's been playing great. And the big question that's going to be brought up is Jimmy Butler at this point, and a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler as compared to a 29-year-old Wiggins. Wiggins having a fringe all-star-like season. He's been giving you the same numbers as Jimmy Butler. This is one of those trades where I personally don't like it. I'm not a fan of it, but I am intrigued by it. I'm interested by it.
Yeah, well, let's put the Wiggins part aside, because that, I agree, is probably the most interesting discussion point here, right? Like, what is the upgrade from Wiggins to Butler? But the bigger point before we get to that is that you did not have to put Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, or an unprotected pick into this deal, right? So the guys that the Warriors look at as the young core of the future are still intact. You know, now, is that going to be a good team in 5 years? I have no idea. Probably not. They're going to need.
All right, let's get hold on real quick, because we got to get this out of the way right now. It's that Jimmy Butler obviously has signed an extension. So a 2-year, $121 million extension to stay in Golden State through the 2026-2027 season. So this is no salary dump. Jimmy Butler is a part of this Warriors future. Back to it, Kolsky.
For 3 years, this year and 2 more, right?
Yes.
And that lines him up with Steph and Draymond. So the old guys are grouped together here, and the Warriors basically have this year and 2 more to try to get something done.
So everything we said, get younger, no more Jurassic Park music. What's the new Jurassic Park coming out?
Well, they didn't get older, though, right? I mean, I would like this way less if they had to put somebody under 25 that matters into the deal, but they didn't. So that.
But Andrew Wiggins matters. He matters tremendously.
But it's a separate conversation. So we'll get to the Butler versus Wiggins thing, I promise. I want to start with the easier things. I'm trying to start with the easy things. It's clearly good that they didn't have to put Moody, Kuminga, or Podziemski in this deal. It's clearly good that they didn't have to put an unprotected pick in this deal if things go totally, upside down. They still have, we'll see what the protection is, but I'm sure they have protection there. The second thing is the money. Ignore it because it doesn't matter. The Warriors are up against every conceivable thing that blocks you from just going out on the market and signing a big name player. They could not have done that. And the fact that Butler's going to make $60 million next year instead of $30 million, the only difference is money out of Joe Lacob's pocket. So Warrior fans, ignore it. It doesn't matter that Jimmy Butler's making $60 million. You weren't going to be able to trade him again anyway in the next 2 years. That affects the franchise bottom line to some degree. It does not affect the product on the court. So I wouldn't worry about his money at all. In his own way, he's earned it with an incredible NBA career. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because it's certainly reasonable to take the position that I think you're taking, which is fine. Jimmy Butler.
Andrew Wiggins is better than Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler has a history that's excellent, but right now, Chuck Walter prefers Andrew Wiggins to Jimmy Butler. And I'll tell you, although I think that's reasonable, I'll tell you why I think you're wrong. It's two things, basically. The first one is just at a baseline. Jimmy Butler brings a level of competitive fire and ability to call his own number that Andrew Wiggins never really had, and I think we can reasonably say never will have.
So you believe that everything we saw this year statistically from Jimmy Butler is just due to his notorious reputation for not giving a damn about the regular season?
Statistically, what do you mean? You just mean that his point total is
statistically, he's
down?
got the same numbers as Wiggins. That's what I'm saying. And Wiggins has been turning it on lately. He's been available.
He's scoring the same number of points. I believe Butler's shooting a better percentage from the field, although probably a little worse from three. But yes, I think the reason that he's scoring 17 points this year, which is, got to be a low for the last decade of Butler's career, is because he was less involved in the offense and he was playing less and he was shooting less. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I think some of it is the Heat's choice and I think that's part of why Jimmy Butler was upset. I also think some of it is him not playing his best at times, because we can argue about how he handled this, right? It's clearly not awesome the way he handled it. I do think it's pretty typical for NBA stars who want to call their own shots, but it doesn't make you feel great about him. And if he has the same attitude with the Warriors that he had with the Heat, then obviously this was a terrible trade, right? But even if he's in a weird place mentally, he just possesses a level of drive and aggressiveness that isn't part of what Andrew Wiggins brings to the floor. He might end up with the same numbers on any given night. Andrew Wiggins might outscore him on any given night, but you can't really count on Andrew Wiggins to do anything at any given time. Right?
I get that 100%, but 35 years of age, does that mean anything to you? Because we always talk about age and players historically slow down around this time.
It means something. And if this was a trade to make Jimmy Butler the number
you're
one
committing
guy
to him in the future, that's another thing. You're tied up to him. Forget the money. I mean, you were tied to him for being successful
for 2 years. Yeah. They had to, do we agree they had to do something?
I'm intrigued. I'm not as pissed off as you would think. I do believe that like Wiggins and Butler, it's somewhat lateral, but let's put it this way.
Let me finish.
Wiggins, Butler better be better than Wiggins. That's the big thing that I take away from this trade. He better be significantly better than Andrew Wiggins here.
Oh yeah. Of course he better be better.
Significantly, because you're throwing a first in there too.
Yeah, but I think reasonably what you would hope is that Jimmy Butler is a little better than Andrew Wiggins in that, like, you can go to him to go get a bucket semi-regularly. He is going to make it hard for teams to triple team Steph Curry the way they have been. Just right at the beginning, that's going to happen. I would hope that you get a slightly better version of Jimmy Butler than you had in Andrew Wiggins during the regular season. But let's be serious. The real reason that Jimmy Butler is a better option than Andrew Wiggins is because of playoff Jimmy. And with that, you have a chance to enter the postseason, however that ends up happening, with two legitimate fourth quarter killers on your basketball team. And even if Andrew Wiggins does every other thing that Jimmy Butler does, which I don't think he does, but even if he did, he's never going to be that guy. He's just never going to be that guy. And I think the Warriors decided, based on this year, look, with as much time as Draymond and Kuminga have missed, there's no doubt Andrew Wiggins has been the second most valuable player on the Warriors this year. So I'm not trying to diss Wiggins. But there's a level of killer that he just isn't. And Jimmy Butler just is. And obviously the Warriors were willing to gamble that killer comes out in a way that gives them a shot at this thing.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Chris Middleton is no longer a member of the Milwaukee Bucks, and Kyle Kuzma is.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
The Milwaukee Bucks have traded Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, a first-round pick swap in 2028 for Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and a 2025 second-round pick. So I'm going to be going to the comments for this as well, just to get some of your opinions on it, but I'm in shock. Like, we've been hearing the rumblings that the Bucks were going to make a move. We've been hearing the rumblings that Kyle Kuzma was one of those guys. But we've been hearing a lot of names, right? We were hearing Jimmy Butler. We were hearing Bradley Beal. Then we started hearing the Kyle Kuzma talk, and they kept on building. And now we are here. It is not official yet, quote unquote, but it's in the works. It's looking like it's going to happen. So why? Why? That was the very first question that I had when I saw the news. Why? And when you look at the whys, you can look at Chris Middleton's performance so far this season. Double ankle surgery, that's hard to overcome. We have seen, he seemed like he's lost the step. We have seen it, but I still had some hope personally that come playoff time, he'd be able to contribute. And him being in that third option role gave me a little bit more confidence in it, because we weren't going to need Chris to be the Chris Middleton that he was in 2021 when the Bucks won a championship. We just needed someone to be a connector piece to kind of help out on the edges there. And it's not going to happen. I think the part of it that disappoints me the most in this move is that we never got a chance to see Dame, Giannis, and Chris in the playoffs together healthy. Shoot, we haven't gotten a chance to see Chris and Giannis in the playoffs healthy together since they won that championship. And that's the part of it for me that is disappointing about this experience. But why? Why would you make this move? What do the Bucks benefit from it? The first one, you get under that second apron. And we understand how big of a deal that was for the Bucks to get underneath the second apron. Getting Kyle Kuzma's contract in there, moving off of AJ Johnson, it cuts about $8.5 million off of the Bucks salary to get him under that second apron for this season, which does open up greater flexibility for this team to make additional moves. So now they can aggregate contracts as long as they don't bring in more dollars than what they send out. That was not on the table beforehand, right? So you do have a bit more roster flexibility in how you're able to continue to build out this roster. The Bucks believe with Kyle Kuzma, apparently they believe with Kyle Kuzma, it can help unlock some Giannis at 5 lineups. They believe in Kuz's defense. They believe in Kuz being able to help the Bucks play even faster going forward. We'll see how that turns out, because if you look at the numbers alone of what Kyle Kuzma has been doing this season, it doesn't inspire much confidence that he's going to be able to come in and excel in that role. You know what I mean? Like, Kyle Kuzma is shooting under 30% from 3 this season. Under 30% from three this season. He is shooting 28% from three on 5 attempts a game. And you might be like, hey, it's just a bad year, down year. He had some injuries that he's coming back from. Understood. But he's a career 33% three-point shooter. His best year, 36, 37% three-point shooter. He's going to have to be better than that for the Bucks on this team. But I got so many thoughts, y'all. I got so many thoughts. It's hard to even know where exactly to start with it because Chris Middleton, everydayers know, Chris Middleton's been my favorite Buck for quite some time. And his place in Bucks franchise history is solid. First in threes, third in assists, third in points, fifth in steals, seventh in rebounds, all time a great. It hurts to see him go. And as more time continues to pass, like if I would have did this live pod immediately as the news was breaking, I don't think I would have been able to be as illogical about the whys behind it and what does this do for this team. And I guess the first question that I have for everybody out there is for you to think about this. If the Bucks did not make a move at all this season, what do you think that the ceiling for this team was, assuming health, with Giannis, with Chris, with Dame? What do you think that the ceiling of this team was? I had this question I asked on social media to some of my followers as well. And the common refrain that I got back was about a second round exit. Second round seemed to be the ceiling that most people saw for this team before making any moves. Do you think that that ceiling has drastically decreased now with Kyle Kuzma being on the team? Personally, I don't think the Bucks are as good with Kyle Kuzma as they were, even with this version of Chris Middleton with the 2 ankles that still need some work. But I don't think that this move has also decreased the ceiling for this team this season. I still could see this team getting to the second round, still see this team in that same atmosphere, even if Chris Middleton's not part of the picture. So for this season, yeah, they might be a little bit worse, so to speak, but I think that the quote unquote ceiling for this team is still around the same because so much of it depended on Giannis and Dame being who they are, getting there healthy, being able to perform. So in that sense of it, that helps this be a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. But man, sending Chris to the Wizards, the worst team in the league. I mean, I know you can't help that, but it is what it is. We were hearing so much at first, about Jimmy Butler possibly being traded to the Bucks. Then we started hearing Bradley Beal's name thrown around as somebody who might be traded to the Bucks. And honestly, the Bradley Beal conversation, I had never seen the fan base more united in a move that they did not want to happen when Bradley Beal's name was thrown out there. And it made me think hey, maybe the Bucks are leaking this information so that when they actually make the move that they do make, it don't feel as bad. Like getting Kyle Kuzma after hearing that Bradley Beal was an option, so on and so forth, you might feel a little bit more encouraged by that. But with Bradley Beal coming to town, Lord, with Kyle Kuzma coming to town, one thing that I am glad about, and I see Samuel in the comments mention this, the comments are coming quick, y'all. I'm trying to keep up with y'all, but he said, I'm glad we didn't give up our 2031 pick, and I could not agree more with that piece of it. I am so glad that the Bucks did not have to give up that draft compensation in order to facilitate this trade. But what they did have to give up on the way is AJ Johnson, our first round draft pick from this year. So really throwing AJ Johnson into this trade, in my book, is like adding an additional first round pick into the trade calculations. AJ Johnson was somebody who came into the league, was who needed the development. You saw him getting his reps down on the G League with the Herd. He was somebody who wasn't expected, to come and contribute this year, but he was somebody who the Bucks had high hopes in his development and being able to contribute in the years coming. So he's now out the door along with Chris Middleton. One of the things that I said that my main goal for the trade deadline for the Bucks would be for them to get under that second apron and for them to be able to clear off a roster spot in order for them to be able to take Ryan Rollins' contract from a 2-way contract to a standard contract, right? And with this trade of them bringing back Kuzma and Baldwin while sending out Chris and AJ Johnson, they did not clear the roster spot for that to happen. But again, they were able to open up the flexibility to aggregate contracts. So my initial thoughts on this move, if this is the only move that the Bucks make at the trade deadline, I will be disappointed that this is the only move. I don't think that it changed necessarily what the ceiling of this team could be, even though I think that they are worse. I think that they still have a shot as long as they have a healthy Dame and a healthy Giannis. But there has to be something else, I feel like. I would need to see them find a way to be able to translate Rollins' contract over to a full-time one. And on top of that, too, I mean, here's a question I have for y'all, and I want you to think about. One thing that we have heard Giannis say about this Milwaukee Bucks team and his time being here is that he wants to be here as long as they show that they are serious about contributing or being able to go after a championship. We need to be competitive. We need to be competitive. I need to know that this franchise cares as much about chasing these championships as I do. That's what we've heard from Giannis consistently. Does this move do that? Does this move do that? In a vacuum? I don't think so, but I do think that it opens avenues for them to continue to do that. We have talked about how the CBA is so restrictive to what the Bucks can do in any other team that is over that second apron. If you stay in that second apron for too long, then you talk about getting some draft picks frozen in the future. And that's hard to deal with, but it's like your window is now. Your window is now. How much better did the Bucks get? We're going to see. I still think that this Bucks team needs another big. Maybe Kyle Kuzma can do that. And I think that's one of the hopes of Kyle Kuzma, being able to unlock those Giannis at 5 lineups, because in the small sample sizes that we have seen with Giannis being the small ball 5 for this team, the rebounding has suffered. Theoretically, Kyle Kuzma should be able to come in there and help clean that up in those small ball lineups. Kyle Kuzma should work in those lineups. Kyle Kuzma has shown when he was a role player on that Laker team, those Laker teams, and the Laker team that won championship, that he is someone who can do the dirty work, that he is somebody who can cut, get you some boards, play some defense. Maybe that's what the Bucks need. We're going to see. Time will tell. Time will tell how this move works, but like I can kind of understand it. I don't necessarily like it in this moment, but I can somewhat understand the why behind it, right? Especially if you're looking at the health of Chris Middleton and you're having some concerns about if he's going to be able to be available come playoff time. It just hurts. It just hurts to see somebody who has given so much to the franchise, who helped this team win a championship, traded, especially to Washington. No offense, Washington, but y'all know. Y'all know what race y'all in this year, and it is not for the playoffs, ain't even for the play-in. It is for that draft positioning next year. So it does hurt to see, Chris being traded to a Washington Wizards team that doesn't have really any aspirations this season of going anywhere. Cool to see Middleton and Brogdon reunited. But again, in a vacuum, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more for this team. But it's weird because it's like, I don't think the ceiling necessarily changed. Like, this could work. And John Horst is counting on it working. I do hope that, Giannis has to buy into it. I hope that Giannis understands the future of what they're trying to accomplish here. And I still think they need a big. We'll see if Kuz can provide some of that small ball big role of it. But we'll see if this is the only move that the Bucks make.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in Super Bowl bets, that's icing on the cake. And the $5, you could go to the point spread. On the Super Bowl, FanDuel has it close right now. Chiefs slightly favored. Kansas City laying 1.5 against Philadelphia this Sunday. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Brandon Ingram has been traded to the Toronto Raptors.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast.
The deal that I see right now, and I'm literally doing this live here, it's going to be Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, and multiple draft picks coming back to the New Orleans Pelicans. I think I'm still waiting on what those exact draft picks are, but from what I got texted, it's a first and second round pick at the very least, and we'll figure out the specifics of what those what the picks are. So this is a move that we kind of expected, right? We knew Brandon Ingram was going to get traded by this team here, and so it's not a big shock that it went like this. Getting a first-round pick, getting a second-round pick, getting expiring salary, that's kind of what they were looking for here. It was going to be some combination of that, but this was not going to be a tremendous haul for the New Orleans Pelicans, a la the Anthony Davis trade or some other deals that we've expected. Given the circumstances as of today, and more on this in the next segment here, this was about as good as New Orleans probably was going to be able to do. And if you listen to the show yesterday, the Everydayers heard this. A lot of y'all heard this. It was well listened to. When we looked at Toronto, I said, no way are they going to bring RJ Barrett back. You had to, in this deal, factor in the Pelicans salary cap next year. So they were going to look for expiring salary, and if they carried any money over, it was going to be in a smaller range. Thus, you get Bruce Brown Jr., who's on a $23 million expiring deal, and then Kelly Olynyk, who's going to make next year $13.445 million. That fits in the Pelicans' room to the luxury tax that they have. Right now, if you would just let everyone kind of walk off the books with Trey Murphy's extension kicking in, which adds $20 million to the books next year, you can fit in that $13.5 million from Kelly Olynyk because gives the Pelicans then about $8-9 million to the luxury tax threshold to fill out the rest of the roster. So this fits in the financial constraints that New Orleans was probably kind of had over their head when it comes to this deal. That's why they didn't get an RJ Barrett back. That's what I told you in yesterday's show. Specifically mentioned they weren't going to take back RJ Barrett in this. This deal was also complicated by the fact that Brandon Ingram is due for a lot of money, right? And so you look at that and you realize it was just always going to be a divorce. There's a couple of things with this deal that, kind of made sense that this was going to end up happening. And as I said just a moment ago, all things considered, I think the Pelicans did about as good of a job as they could getting a first-round pick back. I see a lot of y'all saying it's a Pacers 2026 first-round pick that is 1 to 4 protected. That's fine. Look, it's not that pick's going to be likely in the early 20s, early to mid 20s. Getting a first-round draft pick for him that you can use to try and improve the roster later or for whatever you might want to do, I think ends up being a pretty good deal here. Olynyk's likely going to be moved with that pick in some capacity in the future. By doing this deal, the Pelicans fix their financial books and keep things okay for next year. It's not an amazing deal. The only way you would have gotten an amazing deal was maybe 2 years ago on Brandon Ingram or even last year when there was a very real market for him. And more on that in the second and third segment here when we look at a lot of the mistakes that this front office has made with this sort of situation here. But overall, they getting a first-round pick back that's like a usable first-round pick. If you look at the return for De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, 3 first-round picks, that's more than they got for Luka, right? One of those is literally going to turn into 2 second-round picks, and that's not really a great thing. We don't know what this second-round pick that they're getting back is either, but that's a very useful thing to get too. So this trade for New Orleans is not really about the players. It's about the salary cap flexibility and the draft picks. Right? They're out of contention this season. They're not making the playoffs at all this season. Bruce Brown Jr., who's expiring, doesn't really matter. Kelly Olynyk doesn't matter whatsoever here. So that to me says, okay, who really cares about the players? It's about the picks. I will say this helps New Orleans in future trades, when you look at players that are on the roster next season that are making, say, $15-ish million, somewhere in that range, it's literally just Herb Jones and now Olynyk. So that's a really useful type of salary to have to try and trade someone out. If you wanted to get a $20 million player for your $13.5 million player, New Orleans can make this work now, and they couldn't do that before. So it's not a great return for Brandon Ingram in terms of basketball playing talent, but it is a good enough return. Again, given the circumstances, and that's important here for the flexibility here. And when you look at this deal, this is better than losing Brandon Ingram for nothing, in my opinion. Olynyk next year doesn't kill your books whatsoever, and I think that's a really important thing, that is someone that doesn't put them in a bad position. If you had traded for RJ Barrett, along with, say, Chris Boucher or someone expiring, then all of a sudden you would have been over the luxury tax already, and we would have been doing this dance leading up to the trade deadline ahead of time to try and duck the luxury tax. So that's where I think this ends up being a fine deal for the New Orleans Pelicans here. So there you go. There's a flip side of this too, as well, of you just made the Toronto Raptors better. This is a team that I get this from their perspective and I don't. This is a team that could have been competing, right, for a top draft pick. Now you kind of take them out of that equation depending on when Brandon Ingram returns. So this helps the New Orleans Pelicans tank. It hurts another team's tank. It gives you financial flexibility. When you kind of put that up and look at it as of today at 11:08 p.m. on Wednesday, February 5th, it's been a 2 days, y'all. That's as good of a deal and a situation as you're going to find. Is that as good of a trade as you would have gotten a year ago? Absolutely not. 2 years ago? Absolutely not. And I want to acknowledge that here. But given the circumstances right now, about as good as you could really have hoped for in a position like this.